They look like you're in a photo booth. You know what you need is do a custom background bookstore. They make those, you know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's see.
Got a picture, or did you use that filtered?
It's a filter thing.
Filter thing, make it look like it's a drawing.
Kind of cartoony, yes.
All right. This is Ross with Capital Books, my wife Heidi. We are a small independent bookstore in Northern California, in Sacramento, in downtown. We opened almost a year before COVID, so the last 6 months on our 1-year anniversary have been interesting to say the least. And as we are no longer going to be able to do in-person events, we are happy to have Joe Walton do something virtual from Canada to at least have events coming on. So we really appreciate your time. And I've had really good success with your books in the store as well. You were one of the ones I started with as I worked, and you know, as I'm looking forward to continuing to carry all of your books as they come along. So thank you very much.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Here.
Wish I was really with you, but I'll take being virtually with you.
Get there. So, you know, the thing that is for me was interesting, and I kind of want to talk to you some about backlist as we talk, is that as a small store, it's really hard to figure out what to carry because you have to kind of figure out your market. We have, you know, room for about 10,000 books, and we have everything. It's not a science fiction fantasy bookstore. You know, we have art books, we have history, we have all the various bestsellers. But what I have found, particularly in COVID, is having every book that an author has out help sell the stuff that will normally sell anyway. And what I mean is that if you have one of your books, it may or may not get picked up. I have 6 of your books on the shelf. They're more likely to sell. And it was one of those things that I kind of discovered, even though on our website, people can order anything. All the books are there, you know, but they want to buy the thing that's there, and they want to see the fact that you're actually, I don't want to say supporting, but I think it's that the commitment of, if I have all of somebody's books, they must be good. And you were one of those. I think it wasn't Lent. It might have been Tooth and Claw was the first one I had from you. And then Lent came in, and then I started adding in some of the backlist, and they all sell. So it's been an interesting thing. And so I'm wondering kind of what your experiences selling your books are with that in mind. I realize that you get a pop when there's a new book that comes out, but do you see that drag up your older books at the same time?
Yes, definitely. There is always a bounce in my older books when a new book comes out, or even if an old book is republished. Todd did an absolutely gorgeous mini hardcover of Tooth and Claw.
That's right.
Did you see that? It was such a cute edition.
Yep.
That came out sort of like for the Christmas sales last year. And Tooth and Claw came out in 2003. It won the World Fantasy Award in 2004. It's an old book. But when that new cute hardcover came out, I expected it would sell copies, but it also sold copies of my other books. All my books got a little bounce when that cute hardcover was there, encouraging people to pick that up and maybe pick up the others as well. So yeah, I guess that is how it happens.
And didn't Tor just put one of your books in the Tor Essentials? Did you have
yes.
another?
Among others, my Hugo and Nebula Award-winning novel that all booksellers and librarians love. But booksellers like that book because it is about a character who reads. So she reads a lot, and she talks about books within the book. So the book sells books. People who buy that book come back and they sort of say, have you got all these old science fiction books that she reads in the book? And that's the one that just came out, well, just March, came out in the Tour Essentials line. I love the Tour Essentials line. I'm writing some introductions for some of the books that they're bringing out in it. China Mountain Zhang and with Maureen McHugh and Susan Polwick's The Necessary Beggar are coming out with intros from me. Great line.
Yeah, good. So, where you crossed over a lot, poetry to prose, both in reference and in actual poetry to writing prose. How do you find, which one is easier, which one is harder, or are they both just different enough that, are they just different?
They are different, and poetry is easier.
Okay.
Poetry is easier than talking. Poetry is really, really natural.
Okay.
For me.
All right. Let's see. Sorry, looking up. Which of your current books are you most, which is the one that you recommend to people when somebody wants to know what you've written and they've never read any of your stuff?
So I've written a lot of books at this point. I've written 15 novels, and they're all different from each other. I mean, some of them are in series. I have a couple of ones where there's 3 books in a series. But if you count those as the same, then they're all different from each other. So what I usually do when somebody asks me that question of where should I start reading you, my usual answer is to ask them what kind of books they like, or what kind of science fiction they like, and then I'll recommend one depending on what they like. For somebody who normally doesn't read genre, I will recommend My Real Children, which is the book that you can give to your mother. And your mother, who I assume reads women's fiction, will be able to understand it and get with it and realize there's nothing so peculiar about science fiction and fantasy as they had thought. If somebody is somebody who likes reading a lot of science fiction, I will recommend, among others. If they like romances, I will recommend Tooth and Claw, my dragon sentimental novel. If they like mysteries, I'll recommend Farthing, which is the first in the Small Change books, which are alternate history mysteries. If they like historical novels, I will recommend Lent, which is like a historical novel. Yeah.
I'm finding, interestingly enough, and I spent the first part of my career in comic book stores.
Huh.
And it is very hard to get, I will call them normal people, to come into a comic book store unless they've heard a review of something on NPR or the like. They'll come in and they will ask for that thing. And typically it is something that is not friendly. You know, it's oftentimes, I think the big one was always Mouse. And Mouse was never a friendly graphic novel to people who haven't read graphic novels before. And so usually what I would do is I would say, hey, promise me, if you take this home and you read it and you don't like it or you don't understand it or whatever else, bring it back. Let me give you something else in exchange and see if I can help you get into the graphic novel thing. And as you were saying about people that aren't into genre fiction, I'm finding more and more on the book end of things that they're already used to it. They just don't know it. They don't understand that Handmaid's Tale is science fiction, or Time Traveler's Wife, or The Road. They just see those as books, but they're not in the science fiction section. So they go in there and they don't have to deal with all of the,
Yeah.
really, really genre stuff. And I think you are correct. And I'm going to experiment, I think, with, or what you will, and rack that potentially in fiction. Thank you very much. and see, because we're small enough that we get to experiment like that, and putting it in with fiction, right, or just our general fiction category, might be interesting to see who picks it up, who doesn't, versus who's going to go into the science fiction section because that's where they expect it. And I think those two groups are different, but it's easier to move them from one to the other. Anybody who has read, go back to Handmaid's Tale or seen the show,
Mm-hmm.
you can introduce them to things like that, because now they're into dystopian fiction, and there's a whole category of that they just don't know exists because they've never actually moved into that shelf.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Or What You Will, since that's your latest one.
Yeah. And seriously holding it up, this is a cover that you could put on a mainstream shelf.
Yes, you could.
Which is not true of all science fiction covers.
Mhm.
But this would not repel your mainstream reader, which is kind of good.
Right. I mean, it's there's. I will say that Tor in particular has done some really spectacular covers. They really have done a better job marketing books that way than other genre publishers who just go to the same style. It's the male bikini.
Irene Gallo is a very good art director.
Okay.
She knows what she's doing. I love the cover they put on Lent. That is just perfect for the book.
Yeah.
It really is.
And that could, and that's another one that, easily could go next to, Name of the Rose and other historical fiction that nobody's going to recognize is something other than just that until they
Wolf Hall, you could put it there.
Yep, it could.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Or What You Will.
Yes.
Where did you start with that one? What was your inspiration? What did you do to how long did it take you to go from spark to finished concept?
So the first idea that I had for writing Or What You Will was on a panel in a science fiction convention where the writer James MacDonald, who with Deborah Doyle writes the Mage World books, he was saying that he always uses the same characters in all his books. They're like a repertory cast, he said. And he'll have the grumpy old man and the heroic young man and the perky girl, he said. And I went, but the idea that he was saying is that he always reuses the same characters and he casts them in different roles in the new story. And I don't do this. And this was kind of a new concept for me. But he'd used this term repertory cast, and I thought, what do they do in between engagements? What do they do when they don't have a role in the new book because the new book doesn't have the grumpy old man? What are they doing at that time? And so the idea of characters as actors in books and having an independent existence kind of came into my mind from that. And I started sort of idly thinking about that. Now, that would have been a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, before I really got started on the book, before I really got the idea for the book. And I started writing it in February of 2018. And I finished writing it. I had a through draft in August of 2018. And then I revised it probably, I finished revising it, I think, in May of 2019. It took quite a lot of fixing and getting it all straight. But I had the first draft in that time. And of that time, I was in Florence for about 6 weeks writing it. Of the time, the exact time in which it is set in 2018, I was there in those weeks that the characters are there. Whenever I say anything about the weather or birds flying the wrong way up the river or anything, it's all it was happening, because I decided it would be really interesting to actually use some current events and current things that were happening and sort of put them in the book as they happened. That's not anything I'd ever done before. And it tells you not to do it in the Turkey City lexicon, and it is my ambition to break all the rules of the Turkey City lexicon. I'm just joking, but I did do that. I thought it would be a fun thing to do,
Okay.
and I did it.
This may be a silly question because you probably already know, but have you read the Thursday Next books by Jasper Fforde?
Yes, I've read the first one.
Okay, it's not quite the same concept, but close in that the book characters have a life of their own, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely in the book.
Yeah,
and
they can come out of books and do things. Yes.
The thing that I find interesting also is that I don't know if he is Welsh or not, but he rags on the Welsh a lot in all of his books. And I think, I don't remember, was it the Thursday? It was either in the Thursday Next books or one of his other ones where the Welsh basically had their own country again. And you had to pass through a passport to get in and things like that. And it's, I know that you've, that's part of your history. How does that affect your writing at all? That whole second language that is.
Everything affects your writing. So yes. So I've read the first Thursday Next book. My husband really likes them. He loves those books. But I don't tend to find that kind of humor funny. And if you don't find it funny, then it is not doing anything for you, and you don't do it. And my general feel about things like that is the line from the movie Princess Bride, where the grandfather says, "You're very clever, now shut up." And that is my general feeling when I'm reading something like that. I feel like it's getting in its own light. Yeah, you're very clever, now shut up. So I would not say that was influential. Being Welsh certainly is a real thing in my personal history and my life, and is an influence on me as a human being.
And my understanding, not having ever done deep dive into it, is that Welsh is a very difficult language outside
Yes.
of being born into it.
It's a very difficult language, yeah.
And that's kind of my question here, more than almost anything else. Though his Thursday Next is I would call it within the same subgenre as yours, but it was kind of the common concept of that, plus the fact that either he is Welsh or he is very familiar with Welsh, because it comes up in other books too. Everything he is set into England somewhere deals with Wales, but I guess it almost goes back to the poetry question, because knowing more than one language, and particularly a difficult language, how when you're thinking or when you're writing, do you think one or the other, or is it,
Oh.
or does it affect the words that you use as opposed to what you might not if you didn't know the nuances of that?
Okay, so Welsh is a minority language in Wales. Less than 20% of people in Wales speak Welsh. It was my grandmother's first language. Was my mother and my aunt's second language. I sort of speak it. You don't need to speak Welsh in everyday life. It's not like I live in Montreal now. I shop in French. I speak French in restaurants. I use French all the time because Montreal is a French city. There's nowhere in Wales where everybody doesn't speak English. Everybody speaks English. Some people also speak Welsh.
Okay.
So it's not like everybody is bilingual. I sort of speak Welsh. I can certainly pronounce it. I can make Welsh jokes. I can sing Welsh songs. I talk to cats in Welsh because it's well known that cats don't speak English. But I certainly don't think in Welsh. And I don't think I ever have, even when I was a child, I don't think I really did.
Okay.
And I would never consider writing in Welsh. It has never crossed my mind to do that. I do know people, I know a lot of people here in Montreal who are utterly bilingual and have been always. And I know some people who write in both languages. A wonderful writer called Eve Maynard, who in English, he wrote the Book of Nights, which Gene Wolfe dedicated his Dragon Knight books to Eve. And he's written loads of things in French, terrific writer. And he says he has ideas that are in one language or the other. The idea comes in one language or the other. So I think for people who are truly bilingual like that, your mind just works that way, where it goes like that. I think it's very valuable to have other languages present when you're a child to help form your sense of what language is and how language works. So you don't think that English is the only thing there is, the only way that a language can be. Mm-hmm. And I certainly did have that.
Okay.
And one of the things that I've been doing during COVID is that I help run, I do program for a small convention here every October in normal years called Scintillation. And we have a Discord server, and we've had a very active Discord server all through COVID. And one of the things I've been doing is reading all my books out loud on the Discord server. For half an hour a day, I read a chapter of my books. I started with reading this one, and I've been sort of reading lots of them. And I am presently reading The King's Peace, my first novel, aloud. And you know what? I've improved an awful lot as a writer since I wrote that book. But it's got lots of Welsh in it. It's got lots of Welsh names and Welsh place names. And in Welsh, one of the things that makes Welsh super hard, when you use the word the, you change the consonant that the word starts with. So if you were going to say bridge, right, if it was a Welsh word, bridge, if you wouldn't say the bridge, you'd say the pridge. And if you were going to say cat, the cat would be the gat, because the consonant changes. And you just automatically do it when you're speaking Welsh. You don't think about it. I don't think about it. I just do it right. And if I do think about it, I trip over my tongue. Mm-hmm. Anyway, when I was reading The King's Peace aloud the day before yesterday, I automatically did a triglad, one of those consonant changes, for the place name that was a Welsh place name that had V before it. And I did a C to G in reading it aloud, because it's automatic weirdness is pre-programmed in my head.
I think it's. I think that's when I talk to people who speak Spanish, they have a hard time with the fact that English words don't typically have gender, you know, and you have to reach for what's the non-gendered version of this word. And I had that problem in high school doing Spanish, which was all of a sudden I have to think that different words have gender, you know, and some words don't automatically go to gender, you know, but it's an O or an A, and you know, that's kind of where I gave up.
And your adjectives have to match.
Everything.
I have to do that in French and Italian, and it's you just have to brute force memorize it. If the table is a boy or a girl.
So, since you're not touring, other than virtually, what kind of promotions have you been doing?
I've been doing various online bookstore things like this with bookstores around the place. And that's it really, because what can you do? You know, we did a Goodreads giveaway that was very successful. but what can you do? Just what can you do when you can't get out there?
Do you find that you're reaching more people virtually than you could have if you were touring in person?
Well, it's possible that more people are watching things virtually, but are they buying the book? When you do a real bookstore event, I'm sure you know this, but when you do a real bookstore event, people buy the book when you're there. More people buy the book. But also, people don't come to a bookstore event because they want to hear me talk about things. And they don't come because they want to scribble in their book either. They come because they want 2 minutes of real contact. Actual real contact, which is why real bookstore events are kind of draining. Because, you know, you do your reading or your Q&A or whatever, and then everybody wants their book signed, and what they really want is for you to really make contact with them. And sometimes it's hard to do that, and you've got to do it, and other times it's really easy and they're super interesting, and you could talk to them for half an hour, but you can't because there's a line, and you've got to sort of push them away, and then go to the next person. And it is a draining thing to do. I wish I could do it. I love to do it right now when I haven't seen anybody forever, you know. But for people who are introverts, it's really, really hard. I am not an introvert. And I like doing it, but it's exhausting. And at the end of doing it, you're exhausted because that's what they want. And you really do make contact with people, and they come because they want to say to me, I loved your other book. I loved, usually among others. I loved among others. And they really do love it. And they really do want to tell me that they loved it. And I hear that. And it's very heartwarming that they love it. And they want to tell me that. They want to hear me hear it. And sometimes they'll cry because they love something in a book so much. There was somebody whose mother had Alzheimer's and then died, and they'd read the Alzheimer's stuff that is in My Real Children, and it really connected with them, and they had tears in their eyes when they were telling me this story. They want to make that real connection with me, and that's why people want to come to real live bookstore events that have authors, because they want to connect. And I mean, I guess some people come because they're bored and there's a thing going on and they can find a new thing, and that's good too. But you cannot have that in a virtual environment. It just isn't possible. Even if you do questions and you open it up for questions, and I can answer somebody's question, but it's a distant thing. It's not warm, it's not real. You're not going to get that thing where the person is confiding in me about their mother and the Alzheimer's. It's just a completely different thing, really.
We did a tour with a local author who just moved to Sacramento who does some middle grade, early YA fantasy, and we took her to 3 schools. And one of the schools I went to, the woman who had organized the event said that one of the older girls that wasn't middle grade, that she was freshman, sophomore, whatever, was going to come into the event because she'd really asked for it because she really liked the author, and she sat on the side crying for most of the talk because she, and then got to go to the event and the whole bit. But yeah, I mean, writers build connections with readers, I think, differently than a lot of other things. And I think it has to do with words, it has to do with time, it has to do with the ability to reread stuff. When you connect, you connect. And
yeah. And actually, another thing to do with Or What You Will. Okay. Or What You Will is a very meta book. And when you talk about it, when I talk about it, it is a very meta book. And most books that are very meta are also kind of cold and distanced and ironic. And Or What You Will is not those things. It is a warm, present book that is meta in a sort of warm, different kind of way. More like most of my books are kind of, warm and there. And it's the same. You may reach more people in an internet event, but in a distanced, cold way, not in a warm, up-close kind of way. And so, it's the same.
Yeah.
I'm seeing lots of people talking about how this is the new normal. And I mean, even we've talked about the fact that when we do in-store events in the future, we're going to still record them and live cast them and stuff because the technology makes it easier and the whole bit. But that the difference between being able to be next to somebody that you have a connection with, get the picture, get the signature, get whatever, that you get to take with you. Even if somebody buys a book with a book plate, it's a book plate. As opposed to the to so-and-so, congratulations on the new baby, all of those things that you can get within 2 minutes.
Yes,
Changes that. So, I mean, I have signed stuff from people and I don't do a lot of that, but the ones I have are important to me because of that connection in one way or another, and because it was in person, as opposed to, all right, I got a signed book with a tipped-in plate. Yes, it's signed, and yes, it's on my shelf, and I'm happy to have it. But this one, I got to meet them at fill in the blank place. Here's what we talked about. He even did a little sketch next to his. Those things become different. So, one of my worries, I think, in a bookseller environment is that people are going to go this route more because they can. It's easier to do a virtual tour. And, and a lot of authors, particularly, mid-list and self-published authors are used to doing lots and lots of, blog tours and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I worry that publishers will cut back on tour budgets.
Me too. I worry about that too. I worry that the publishers will think, well, this worked really well and it didn't cost us anything and we're just going to do that in future and we're not going to do this. And the other thing I worry about that with is conventions. That all these conventions that are going virtual and doing virtual conventions, and they're going to see they didn't have to pay anything for the hotel, but people will still pay for membership. And that we will have fewer conventions. I keep saying I miss my life. My life involves a certain amount of going to bookstores and doing events and going to conventions and a lot of travel. And I miss my life. Some of my life is being at home writing, but a lot of my life involves going places, doing these things. And I would like to have my life back, which would involve these things. Yeah.
And I'm hoping, I mean, because COVID's going to change a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
we found out yesterday that one of the cafes across the street from our store is closing.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been, the current owners were there for 17 years, and the previous owners for that own another business nearby that we know, and they owned that business for like another 10 or 12 years prior to that. So let's call it 25 years of one cafe on that corner that is now gone. And, you know, it's going to happen to the bookstores. You know, we're going to lose a certain chunk of bookstores. I worry about the comic industry. The comic industry, I think, is even harder hit because, but but the good news, I think, at least from our point of view, is that people are still buying books, and they're buying more books because they're stuck at home. And then early in COVID, and now for whatever reason now, Amazon is slowing down on deliveries. At the beginning of COVID, they downgraded books for like 2.5 months. And so we were getting stuff, you know, we were special ordering stuff for customers that we were getting like 2 weeks before Amazon promised to get it. And that's happened again. So I think there's an opportunity for bookstores. At the same time, there's a really big hill to cover to get past it, to do that. And that, it worries me to some extent on that. And even, you know, where you're talking, I mean, no conventions no in-person conventions is a huge blow to, I think, fandom and the core group that keeps science fiction, mysteries, romance, comic books alive.
No, this is my nightmare. And it really depends how long this lasts.
Yeah.
I think we can take 1 year, but we're talking about going on into next year before there's a vaccine, and who knows? And it's
So let's talk about something more happy. You have been doing the books you've read during the month on tour.
Yes.
When did you start doing that, and how do you pick the books that you're reading?
I started doing it in February 2019. Just, you know, what I've read this month. And it's the record of what I've read that month. It's the truth. It is just what I've read. I don't pick the books. It's just the books that I'm reading. And I started doing it because I've been blogging on Tor.com since Tor.com started in 2008. And I was writing about older books, and I was writing fairly long blog pieces about them, some of which have been collected in What Makes This Book So Great. And I did various kind of ongoing things for them. And then I kind of slacked off, and I wasn't doing so much, partly because I'd done all the low-hanging fruit books that I was excited to talk about, that I was rereading. They were older books. And partly because I felt like I was goofing off whenever I read a new thing or a thing that wasn't in genre. And I like reading new things and things that aren't in genre. And I like to read eclectically. And so I sort of wasn't blogging for them so much. I was only blogging occasionally. And they said, well, isn't there something that you would like to do regularly? And I said, well, I'll do a post about everything that I've read, but it'll be the eclectic list of what I've really read. And I'll just write a paragraph about each thing. And they said, yes, great, do that. So I started doing that. And it is just an honest list of what I've read that month.
where
I'm sometimes polite.
how are you finding the books that you read?
Hmm?
How are you
Sorry?
finding the books that you read?
How am
When-
I finding the books that I read? I mean, the,
what I mean is it's what's your discovery process? Are you looking at
oh,
seller lists? Are you looking at do you get arcs coming in from publishers? Do you where are you generating things that you're reading?
sometimes publishers will email me and ask if I would like to read something that they've got coming out, and usually I say no, because usually it doesn't sound like something I would like, but if it sounds like something I would like, then I will read it. And in recent years, I've been very excited to have Carrie Moran's Weave a Circle Round. That was one I was sent to Blurb, and I loved that. It's YA-ish, it's really great. And Arkady Martin's Memory Called Empire, I got to read as an ARC as well. So sometimes I get really brilliant things. Oh, The Vanished Birds, Simon Jimenez.
Yep.
Have you read that? It's so great. It came out in January.
I think I have a copy on my shelf,
But
but
it's like you get books like that, and it justifies the whole thing of all the things that people send me that I do not like, which I just have to say, no, this wasn't for me. But mostly there are writers that I like, and I read all their books, and when they have a new book out, I read their new book. And then I read a lot of non-fiction, which is kind of research for things that I plan to write sometime in the future. And then what happens is I'll read something which is perfectly rational and sensible for me to read as research for something I'm either writing or planning to write. And it'll be great, and the author will be really good. And then I've written 15 other books that are non-fiction, that are about things that I'm not even interested in, but I will read them because the one that I read was really great. And so I have non-fiction writers that I read, and I'll binge read certain things. So that's a way that I find things. And I also I read some classics, as in things that were written in Latin and Greek, because I have a project to read everything that was in the Laurentian Library, so I'm sort of slowly reading my way through everything. And then I try to read classics that were written in other languages. So at the moment I'm reading the Ramayana as my classic that was written in other languages. But before that I read Les Miserables. So, it isn't always that kind of classic. But I always try to be reading one thing at least that is in translation. I'm almost always, normally, I'm reading a couple of different short story things, usually an anthology and a collection. I'm reading a couple of things of poetry at any given time, couple of classics, a relevant non-fiction that I'm reading for research, and an irrelevant non-fiction that I'm reading just because I'm reading it. And I read some travel books, particularly right now. I am enjoying reading travel books. Right now, the main thing that I really, really want to read is romance novels set in Italy.
Okay.
That's what I've been reading through COVID. I've discovered this terrific writer called Nikki Pellegrino, who is writing romance novels set in Italy that are actually good, which is not a requirement. I've been reading bad ones, but good ones are better than bad ones.
good ones are a bonus.
So I totally recommend Nikki Pellegrino if anybody else is looking for a romance novel set in Italy, which I bet nobody is, you know, it's just me.
I am sure there is a Venn diagram that includes people looking for romance novels and then set in Italy.
Yes, yes. And you know, Amazon are very good at, oh, you bought a romance novel set in Italy, here's another one.
Yeah.
So their recommendation algorithms are not normally very helpful because I read really eclectically, but occasionally when I get on a binge of something, then they will be.
Okay.
And my actual reading, I have repetitive strain injury in my hands. And I realized when I had a Kindle, which I was using for travel, and I'd been traveling, and I realized my hands were way better, even though I'd been typing a lot. And I realized that holding a hardcover was damaging my wrists. So my present reading habits are that I will buy a book on the Kindle, I will read it, and if I like it, I will buy either the hardcover or the paperback, whatever, from a bookstore and have the copy, which Emmett, my husband, will read because his eyes don't work with reading it on the Kindle very well. So this way the writer gets more money, and I am still buying books from bookstores as well as buying my ebooks from Amazon. But they've been an absolute godsend at the moment because I don't have to go anywhere. Yeah. if I whatever I want, there it can be.
I remember an old customer of mine, you just reminded me, from 25, maybe even almost 30 years ago, who refused to buy hardcover graphic novels because he always read lying on his back, holding the book over his head, and they were too heavy.
Yeah.
And so
I've got very small hands. I have very low wrist bandwidth. And I think it's better for me for the words to come out than for me to hold up the books. Yeah. But I don't think my local bookseller has any complaints about the number of books that I buy.
As your shelf behind you testifies.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
God, it's a mess. I must tidy my bookshelves. I sit here, this is the chair I sit in, and so I'm always sort of sitting here and then stuffing books behind me that need to be reshelved. So this one is probably the worst in the entire house.
Okay, well,
which is all bookshelves, the whole house is.
I keep trying to convince her that every room needs a bookshelf, and she keeps fighting me on certain rooms.
Yeah, we don't have bookshelves in either the bathroom or the kitchen.
There you go.
The kitchen for us has cookbooks.
Oh, well, yes. Yes.
A lot of cookbooks.
Yeah, I do have cookbooks, but they're in the pantry. Okay. They're not on a bookshelf. Yeah. But yeah, you're right.
What have you read? What's been the like 2 or 3 books you've read in the last couple since COVID? Let's do the COVID reading list that are the ones that you enjoyed the most and that you would recommend the most.
Okay. Well, apart from Nikki Pellegrino, who I'm seriously, I read KJ Parker's 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City.
I saw that one. I read that one.
And I read that all in one day. I ate it up like ice cream. I could not put that one down. It was just exactly what I wanted. That was a really good read. I've read all of the Laurie Marks Logic series. The first one is called Fire Logic, and then they're Fire, Earth, Water, and Air Logic. Right. Fantasy series, very good on chosen family. Those were very, very good. And I've just, in fact, got those as physical copies because Argo had to order them in, so the hard copies of those have just arrived, and Emmett's going to start reading them soon, which will be nice. So those are great. And I started reading those because I did this thing at the beginning of COVID called the Decameron Project, where I got 100 stories, one a day for 100 days, like Boccaccio's Decameron. And we did a Patreon, and I got different writer friends to write stories or to give us the first chapters of novels. And we did that. And Laurie Marks, whose work I wasn't really familiar with, Ellen Kushner recommended her. And she gave us a terrific story, and it was just so good that I went and bought all 4 of her series, and then I really enjoyed them. They were great. I read The Mirror and the Light, the 3rd Wolf Hall book. Right. That's what I was reading when COVID set in, when we got to the, you're never going to go out of your apartment again thing back in March.
And you'll probably always remember it that way too.
Yep.
It's like, you always remember where you were when Elvis died.
Yep, exactly. Isolation, that's when it hit. Yeah, that's what I was reading then. And I've had this strange thing that this is actually really new for me. It's very rare for me not to be able to read, not to be able to concentrate and settle to read. And I've had this strange thing where that has been the case. And so I've given up on a few books that weren't doing it for me, one of which was something I'd really been looking forward to, which was the Heinlein Pursuit of the Panthera, right, which is a variation on Number of the Beast, not a good book. But nevertheless, I was really looking forward to reading this different version of it, and I just couldn't get into it. I could not enjoy it. So that was kind of strange and uncomfortable.
I have a copy of that book around in my office somewhere, and it's the same thing. I'm not quite sure whether I even want to start it because, I have a feeling of all of the Heinlein books because I've read them all, and I don't know that I even want to go into one that never made the cut to get out at that point. Yeah.
Well, I cannot recommend it from the 36% of it that I have read.
Okay.
And it felt like that I'd given it a fair try.
Yeah.
But I just wasn't enjoying reading it. And I've had that happen with a couple of things where, it just not working for me. And this I wrote a couple of posts on Tor.com. One was books in which nothing at all bad happens for people to read during COVID. And the other one was books that grab you, which is a list of books that are really grabby and grab you, and that you cannot put down if you read them. And one that I reread, that was like that was Sylvia Townsend Warner's Lolly Willows, which is it's a mainstream book about a woman who becomes a witch, written in 1927, I think. I might be off by a year or two, but it's late 20s. And she's a spinster aunt, and she lives with a respectable family, and then she goes to live in a village, and she becomes a witch, and there's actual magic, and she's an actual witch at the end of the book, but totally published as mainstream. Sylvia Townsend Warner, who wrote Kingdoms of Elfin, which was kind of published as fantasy, and Small Beer have recently put out.
Okay.
And I hadn't read that for quite a while, and I reread it and enjoyed the heck out of it. Yeah. And right at the moment, I'm rereading A.S. Byatt's Possession and really enjoying it. and sort of don't want to stop reading it and don't want to put it down. Oh, and for book club, we did Day of the Triffids. That was the perfect COVID book.
That is a good COVID book. So, all right. Well, with that, we're going to let you go. I really appreciate your time with us. I hope that we will see you in a year or so. Yep.
Yeah.
We
Yeah. No. As soon as the border is open and it's safe to come into your beautiful and convention-filled country and visit your delightful bookstores, I will be so there. There's so many friends I want to see and places that I want to go. But it
have a place.
It looks like we're going to be able to go to Europe before we're able to go to the US.
Yeah, you will.
The way things are looking right now.
I think we are months away from anybody wanting to come here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I believe that we've said that Canada is keeping the border closed until the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think American citizens are now allowed to go to 4 countries in the world, at least 3 of which nobody wants to go to, because that includes like Somalia and Yemen.
Yeah, yeah. Oh dear. Dear.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for getting in touch and doing this. Thank you for interesting questions. It's been a lot of fun.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Bye, Joe.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.